What if the greatest night of an actor's life ended in heartbreak? In Hollywood's golden age, Oscars weren't just awards. They were symbols of immortality. But behind the glamour, some of these golden statues vanished, melted, or were stolen under mysterious, even tragic circumstances. From firestorms to betrayal, this is the hidden history of lost Oscars and shattered legacies. In this gripping countdown, we reveal 15 classic Hollywood stars whose Oscars were stolen, lost, or destroyed, and the chilling truths behind their disappearances. Margaret OBrien. In 1944, Margaret OBrien wasn't just Hollywood's sweetheart. She was a phenomenon. At only 7 years old, she stole hearts with her role in Meet Me in St. Louis. The Academy was so impressed that they gave her the Juvenile Oscar, a special miniature statuette created for outstanding child performers. But what happened years later to that Oscar would be more bizarre than any plot MGM ever gave her. In the 1950s, O'Brien's housekeeper took the statuette for cleaning and never returned. At first, O'Brien thought it was simply misplaced, but soon it became clear. It was gone. For decades, the disappearance remained a mystery. O'Brien suspected theft, but there was no trace of the statuette. It became one of the Academy's most peculiar cases, a stolen Oscar that seemingly vanished into thin air. O'Brien continued her career, but was deeply hurt by the loss. That little golden statue wasn't just a trophy. It symbolized her place in film history, a childhood dream turned real. Losing it felt like erasing part of her identity. The Academy didn't replace lost awards lightly, so O'Brien lived with the emotional scar for nearly 50 years. Then, in 1995, a miracle unfolded. Two memorabilia collectors came across a strange miniature Oscar at a flea market. It was battered and aged, but engraved with O'Brien's name. They contacted the Academy, who confirmed its authenticity, and within weeks, it was returned to its rightful owner. O'Brien, now in her late 60s, broke down in tears during the handoff, overwhelmed that a piece of her childhood had been found. The Academy, touched by the reunion, even held a small ceremony to mark the return. This isn't just a story about a stolen trophy. It's about memory, loss, and rediscovery. O'Brien's Oscar journey reminds us how deeply these symbols matter to their recipients. They aren't just gold-plated statues. They're emotional anchors. For Margaret OBrien, getting hers back wasn't about validation. It was about closure. And for Hollywood, it was a rare, happy ending in a town that doesn't often deliver them. Rod Steiger. Rod Steiger, the towering presence behind unforgettable performances in On the Waterfront and In the Heat of the Night, was a man of fierce passion. In 1968, his portrayal of Police Chief Gillespie in the Heat of the Night earned him the Academy Award for Best Actor. It was a career-defining moment, a victory he fought for through decades of method acting, emotional risk, and personal sacrifice. But the very Oscar that symbolized his triumph would later meet a fiery end. Literally. Steiger's Hollywood mansion in Beverly Hills was as fiery as the man himself, filled with awards, scripts, and memorabilia. But in the 1990s, tragedy struck when an electrical fault sparked a fire that swept through part of his home. Though Steiger was unharmed, the damage to his personal collection was catastrophic. His Oscar, proudly displayed on a mantelpiece, was partially melted in the blaze. For most, it would have been a symbol of devastating loss. But for Steiger, it was something else, a grim metaphor. He had always battled inner demons, depression, failed marriages, and being typecast in the industry. Steiger famously once said, "Actors live in a constant state of rejection." So when his Oscar melted, he saw it not just as a physical loss, but an echo of Hollywood's cruel indifference. To some extent, it mirrored how he felt forgotten after his peak years, despite his brilliance. The Academy offered to replace the statue, but Steiger reportedly declined. The damaged statue, to him, told a truer story. It's a haunting image, one of Hollywood's finest actors holding a warped, blackened Oscar, its surface twisted like molten metal. It became a strange kind of trophy, marking not just a win, but the cost of that victory. For Steiger, it symbolized everything he'd survived: war, failure, heartbreak, and still kept performing. Few actors wear their careers like wounds. Steiger wore his with brutal honesty. This story isn't just about a melted Oscar. It's about the fragility of legacy. In a town that builds myths, even the most golden moments can go up in smoke. But what endured wasn't the statue. It was the performance that won it. Rod Steiger didn't need an Oscar to be remembered. He just needed one film and one blazing truth. Bette Davis. When you think of Bette Davis, you think of sharp eyes, sharper wit, and an arsenal of unforgettable performances. She was the first woman to receive 10 Academy Award nominations for acting, and won 2. But what many fans don't know is that one of those Oscars simply disappeared. Davis won her first Academy Award in 1936 for Dangerous, though the Academy had not yet adopted the now iconic gold statuette. When the standardized design became official, she was sent a replacement. That Oscar would become the one that vanished into mystery. In the 1990s, Davis's missing Oscar re-emerged, not in a museum, but at an auction house. Her estate had no record of selling it. In fact, it seemed to have changed hands privately over the years. Davis's family and fans were outraged. The Academy, standing by its rule that Oscars should not be sold, intervened. They purchased the award for $79,500 to prevent it from remaining in private circulation and to honor Davis's legacy. It was returned to the Academy's vaults, not to her family, sparking further debate. The incident raised complex questions about ownership and legacy. Who truly owns an Oscar? The person who wins it, or the institution that gives it? For Bette Davis, who fought her entire life for artistic control and industry respect, having her Oscar sold off like memorabilia felt like a final insult. It was a bitter echo of her lifelong battle with Hollywood's power structures. Yet, the mystery persists. How did the Oscar leave her estate? Was it stolen, misplaced, or secretly sold? We may never know. What's clear is that even after death, Davis was at the center of drama, worthy of one of her own films. And in typical Bette Davis fashion, she left behind a controversy that refused to be silenced. Hattie McDaniel. In 1940, Hattie McDaniel made history as the first black person to win an Academy Award for her role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind. It was a bittersweet victory. McDaniel was forced to sit at a segregated table during the ceremony and wasn't even allowed to attend the film's Atlanta premiere. Yet her acceptance speech, full of grace and quiet strength, remains one of the most moving in Oscar history. Her Oscar, however, would suffer a fate as unjust as the racial barriers she broke through. Unlike today's statues, McDaniel's award was a plaque, given to supporting actors until 1943. She displayed it proudly at Howard University, a historically black institution, as a symbol of progress and pride. But in the 1960s, during a campus renovation, the plaque mysteriously disappeared. Some rumors claimed it was stolen during a protest. Others believed it was misplaced or destroyed by accident. No official investigation ever solved the mystery. The loss wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. McDaniel's Oscar represented more than her performance. It was a milestone for black artists in an era of deep segregation. Its disappearance echoed the way Hollywood often erases or overlooks black contributions. Over the decades, numerous efforts were made to recover or replace it, but the Academy never issued a replica. Only in 2021 did the Academy agree to fund a replacement memorial at Howard University, acknowledging the long overdue recognition McDaniel deserved. This wasn't just a stolen Oscar, it was a stolen legacy. Hattie McDaniel's career was marked by compromise and contradiction, but her achievement cracked the wall of Hollywood's racial exclusion. The vanishing of her Oscar remains a painful reminder of how fragile progress can be, and how long the road still is for true equality in the industry. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando wasn't just a movie star. He was a cultural earthquake. When he won the Best Actor Oscar in 1973 for The Godfather, it should have been a moment of glory. But instead, Brando made headlines around the world for refusing the award. His reason? To protest Hollywood's portrayal of Native Americans and the federal government's mistreatment of indigenous people during the Wounded Knee incident. In his place, he sent Sachin Littlefeather, a Native American activist, to decline the award on live television. The reaction was explosive. Some in the audience booed, others applauded. But what became of the actual Oscar statuette is still murky. Since Brando never accepted it, the Academy never formally handed it over. Yet in later years, a Best Actor Oscar bearing Brando's name surfaced in a private collection, sparking rumors that someone else close to the production may have taken possession of it. Despite this, Brando remained indifferent. He never wanted the physical trophy to begin with. Brando's defiance sparked a seismic shift in how Hollywood viewed the Oscars, as not just a celebration of art, but a platform for political expression. His protest marked one of the earliest and most dramatic Oscar moments used for activism. While it didn't result in immediate industry change, it planted a seed that would influence generations of artists. To this day, the whereabouts of Brando's The Godfather Oscar remain uncertain. Some claim it was stored and forgotten. Others say it was quietly reclaimed by the Academy. But the greater mystery lies in Brando's own detachment. For him, greatness didn't live in a golden idol. It lived in truth, even when it made people uncomfortable. That makes his lost Oscar one of the most symbolic absences in Hollywood history. Whoopi Goldberg. In 1991, Whoopi Goldberg made history by winning the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in Ghost. Her performance was electric, blending humor, pain, and personality in a role that stood out in an era of cookie-cutter casting. But years later, that Oscar would take a journey stranger than any supernatural film. It went missing, right in the mail. In 2002, Goldberg sent her Oscar back to the Academy for routine cleaning and polishing, a service offered to winners. But somewhere in the mailing process, the statuette disappeared. UPS confirmed that it had been delivered to the designated cleaning facility, but when the package was opened, the Oscar was gone. Panic set in. Whoopi, devastated, feared her most treasured professional honor had been stolen. The mystery deepened when days later, the Oscar turned up, found in a dumpster at Ontario Airport in California. It was unharmed, except for a few scratches. No one ever fully explained how it ended up there. The prevailing theory is that a worker stole it, panicked, and dumped it when media coverage exploded. The Academy quickly returned it to Goldberg, who reportedly laughed at the absurdity of the situation, but also took no chances afterward. She locked it up. This bizarre postal saga reveals how even an Oscar can be vulnerable to human error, carelessness, or simple greed. Goldberg handled the crisis with humor, but it was a close call. For a moment, it seemed Hollywood's highest honor could vanish like any ordinary package. Thankfully, this time, the story ended with a triumphant reunion. Olympia Dukakis. When Olympia Dukakis won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in 1988 for Moonstruck, her acceptance speech radiated sincerity and disbelief. She had worked for decades in theater and film with little mainstream recognition, and this Oscar was the industry's long overdue acknowledgement. But just hours after the biggest moment of her life, something bizarre happened. Her Oscar was stolen, right from the after-party. Dukakis attended a private party after the ceremony, and like many winners, she placed her Oscar on a table to greet friends and pose for photos. At some point in the evening, the statue vanished. At first, she thought someone had moved it. Then came the awful realization. It had been taken. In a room full of celebrities, photographers, and staff. Her Oscar had been stolen in plain sight. Fortunately, the thief didn't get far. A few days later, the Oscar was recovered after it was anonymously returned to the Academy. The thief, likely spooked by the media attention, never came forward. Dukakis, though shaken, found humor in the ordeal. "I waited 50 years to get it, and almost lost it in one night," she later joked. But the incident reveals something deeper: how fleeting even the grandest triumphs can be in the whirlwind of fame. That someone could slip into a party and steal an Oscar shows how fragile these moments are. For Dukakis, the theft became another strange chapter in a career full of quiet resilience and second chances. Art Carney. Art Carney was already a beloved television comedian when he surprised everyone by winning Best Actor in 1975 for Harry and Tonto, beating out Al Pacino and Jack Nicholson. But Carney, a modest man uncomfortable with fame, was never one to display his accolades. In fact, after receiving his Oscar, he did something few winners would dream of. He put it in a box and stored it in the basement. Years later, during a home renovation, workers stumbled across a dusty, unopened box. Inside, the Oscar, still in pristine condition, wrapped in old newspaper. Carney had forgotten where he'd put it. He later admitted he didn't like showing off and didn't think the trophy defined him. He preferred to focus on his work, his family, and his privacy, away from the glitter of Hollywood. Carney's story is rare in an industry obsessed with recognition. While others would build a glass case for their Oscar, Carney treated it like an old photograph, important but not central. And yet, when the award was found and displayed decades later, it became a symbol of humility in a business built on ego. His Oscar wasn't lost, stolen, or destroyed. It was hidden by choice, a quiet rebellion against the spotlight. In a strange way, it's one of the most powerful stories on this list, not because the statue vanished, but because the man who earned it never needed to be reminded of what he had already proven. James Baskett. James Baskett's story is one of the most bittersweet in Oscar history. In 1948, Baskett received an honorary Academy Award for his portrayal of Uncle Remus in Disney's Song of the South. He was the first black male actor to receive an Oscar, an honorary one, since the Academy didn't recognize his role under the competitive categories due to racial politics. Walt Disney himself petitioned the Academy for the award. But after Baskett died, just months later in 1948 from heart failure, the fate of his Oscar faded into silence. No one knows where the Oscar ended up, not even his surviving relatives. Some believe it remained with Disney's archives. Others claim it was kept by Baskett's widow and later lost during a move. Despite his historic win, the Academy made no effort to track or preserve his award. Nor did Disney, who once championed him, take steps to honor his memory when the studio distanced itself from Song of the South due to its controversial racial themes. What makes Baskett's story especially tragic is the cruel contradiction he faced. Though he gave Disney one of its most iconic performances, he wasn't even allowed to attend the film's Atlanta premiere because of segregation laws. His Oscar, rather than being a triumph, became a symbol of a Hollywood that used black talent, but discarded their legacy. In modern times, film historians have called for the Academy and Disney to publicly honor Baskett with a memorial or replica Oscar. So far, nothing has been done. The physical award may be gone, but what's worse is the erasure of a trailblazer's legacy. Baskett broke barriers in a time when that could cost a career or a life. The lost Oscar is more than a mystery. It's a moral wound that Hollywood has yet to acknowledge. Vivien Lee. Vivien Lee's Oscars lived through chaos, heartbreak, and war, but one nearly didn't make it. Lee won Best Actress for Gone with the Wind in 1939, and again for A Streetcar Named Desire in 1952. Both were well-deserved victories for an actress known for haunting beauty and tragic brilliance. But Lee's personal life unraveled in the decades that followed. Her battle with bipolar disorder grew more intense, and her marriage to Laurence Olivier collapsed under the strain. In the 1960s, while moving out of the home she had shared with Olivier, Lee reportedly lost track of her Gone with the Wind Oscar. During the move, items were misplaced or discarded, and for years, the statue was considered lost. Some claimed Olivier had kept it. Others whispered that it had been sold during one of her emotional breakdowns. The truth finally came out after Lee's death in 1967, when the Oscar turned up in a private collection in New York, bought anonymously at an estate sale. The Academy launched an inquiry, but due to the gray area surrounding ownership, it couldn't reclaim the Oscar. It remains in private hands to this day. Lee's family, meanwhile, expressed sorrow that such a vital piece of her legacy was no longer where it belonged. The disappearance of the Oscar mirrored the disintegration of her later years. A woman who gave the world so much, slowly unraveling in private, while her greatest symbol of triumph vanished from her life. Vivien Lee remains one of the most revered actresses in cinema history. But the missing Oscar is a painful reminder of how fragile greatness can be, how fame, fortune, and accolades can slip away in moments of crisis. Her brilliance lit up the screen. Her Oscar deserved better than to become a collector's trinket. Paul Newman. Paul Newman, the blue-eyed icon of American cool, won his only competitive Oscar in 1987 for The Color of Money. But Newman had a complex relationship with awards. He had been nominated 6 times before finally winning, and by the time he did, he seemed more amused than honored. Later in life, he famously said the Oscars were like chasing a beautiful woman for 80 years. Finally, she relents, and you say, "I'm too tired." Despite the humor, he treasured the award until it nearly slipped away after his death. After Newman passed away in 2008, a batch of his belongings, including his Oscar, was put up for sale by an anonymous associate. The Academy quickly stepped in, citing their rule that Oscar winners are not allowed to sell the statuettes. The rule, implemented in 1950, states that Oscars must first be offered back to the Academy for $1 before they can be sold. Newman himself had signed this agreement when he received the award. But somehow, the trophy was listed through a third party, and Newman's estate scrambled to halt the sale. The auction was stopped, but not before images of the Oscar circulated online, reigniting debate over who owns an Oscar. Newman, who donated millions through his philanthropic work, would never have approved of profiting from his award. His family later issued a statement condemning the attempted sale, calling it deeply disrespectful. Though the Oscar was recovered and secured by the estate, the incident left a stain on Newman's otherwise graceful legacy. This wasn't a case of theft or destruction. It was a near miss, a moment where greed nearly stole a man's honor. Newman's career was built on integrity, and his Oscar became a flashpoint for the values he stood for. In the end, it was rescued. But the scare was a reminder that in Hollywood, even dignity has to be defended, sometimes from your own inner circle. Ingrid Bergman. Ingrid Bergman was cinema royalty, winning 3 Oscars and surviving one of the biggest scandals in Hollywood history. After her controversial affair and marriage to director Roberto Rossellini in the 1950s, Bergman was shunned by American audiences. Yet, she made a triumphant return by winning the Best Supporting Actress Oscar in 1975 for Murder on the Orient Express. However, the fate of that Oscar would become a quiet drama within her own family, almost lost forever. After Bergman's death in 1982, her awards and memorabilia were divided among her children. But one of her Oscars, believed to be either the 1956 Anastasia win or the Orient Express Award, was later discovered to be missing from the family estate. It had been unknowingly sold or misplaced during a European estate inventory review. Her daughter, Isabella Rossellini, became alarmed when she discovered it years later in a private auction catalog. Rossellini acted quickly, contacting the Academy and threatening legal action if the item wasn't pulled from sale. Thankfully, it was withdrawn, and negotiations led to its return. But the emotional toll remained. Rossellini publicly stated that her mother never viewed the Oscar as a commodity. She cherished it, not as a prize, but as a symbol of the return of her dignity. The lost and found Oscar mirrored Bergman's own career, cast out and reclaimed. Her legacy endured, but the temporary loss of the award was a painful reminder of how easily history can slip away, even within families. In the end, the Oscar was returned not just to a home, but to a rightful legacy Bergman had spent a lifetime earning back. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford's 1946 Oscar win for Mildred Pierce wasn't just a career triumph. It was a public redemption. After a slump in her popularity, the role revived her career, earning her an Academy Award that she famously accepted while lying in bed at home, claiming illness. But after her death in 1977, the fate of her Oscar became a mystery that matched her dramatic persona. Crawford's estate was notoriously disorganized. As multiple family members and legal representatives laid claim to various possessions, items disappeared, were sold, or were misidentified. The Mildred Pierce Oscar was reportedly last seen in the 1980s, and then, nothing. Some believe it was quietly sold to pay estate debts. Others think it was taken by a collector who never came forward. For years, rumors circulated that it sat hidden in a private Hollywood memorabilia vault. To complicate matters, the rift between Joan and her daughter Christina, who wrote the infamous memoir, Mommy Dearest, meant that her legacy was already under siege. Christina, disinherited from the estate, claimed she never knew what happened to the Oscar and suspected foul play. The Academy has since tried to trace the statue, but without success. Crawford's Oscar is one of the few confirmed Academy Awards to be missing with no known whereabouts. For a woman obsessed with image and control, having her greatest career triumph vanish is cruel irony. The statue might be gone, but Joan Crawford's ferocious impact on Hollywood remains etched in film history. Still, the mystery of her lost Oscar lingers like the closing shot of a film noir, sultry, unresolved, and unforgettable. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin didn't win a competitive Oscar during his golden years, despite creating some of the most influential films in cinema. It wasn't until 1972 that the Academy gave him an honorary Oscar for his incalculable effect on the motion picture industry. That night was one of the most emotional in Oscar history. Chaplin received a 12-minute standing ovation as he returned to the U.S. after decades of exile during the McCarthy era. But the Oscar itself had a more tragic fate. After Chaplin's death in 1977, his house in Switzerland was burglarized. Among the stolen items was the honorary Oscar. Despite international police reports, the award was never recovered. Chaplin's family even offered a reward, but the Oscar seemed to vanish from the face of the earth. Some speculate it was melted down for gold. Others believe it lies in a private collection, buried under shame or secrecy. What's most painful about the loss is the symbolism. Chaplin's return to Hollywood was a healing moment. A man once vilified, finally embraced. That Oscar represented forgiveness, legacy, and reconciliation. Its theft wasn't just about greed. It was a second betrayal of one of cinema's most cherished figures. Though the Academy never replaced the stolen Oscar, the Chaplin family has since erected a museum in his honor in Switzerland. But the original award's absence remains an open wound, a reminder that even comedy's greatest icon wasn't immune to the cruelties of life behind the curtain. Heath Ledger. Though not from the Golden Age, the tragic tale of Heath Ledger's posthumous Oscar echoes the emotional power of classic Hollywood. In 2009, Ledger won Best Supporting Actor for his haunting performance as the Joker in The Dark Knight. He had died the year prior, and the award was accepted by his family on his behalf. But behind the scenes, A legal battle over the physical statue soon unfolded. Ledger's parents and his ex-partner, Michelle Williams, mother of his daughter Matilda, disagreed on who should keep the Oscar. While Ledger's family publicly presented a united front, internal documents later revealed discussions over ownership and legal responsibility. Matilda, just a toddler, was named the rightful heir. But until she turned 18, the Oscar had to be held in legal trust. At one point, the Academy considered reclaiming the statue to avoid further conflict. Eventually, Ledger's family agreed to hand the Oscar to Matilda's mother for safekeeping. But the situation exposed something unsettling. Even in death, even after cinematic greatness, the battle for legacy can fracture families. The statue sat in limbo, representing not just Heath's genius, but the heartbreak left behind. Today, the Oscar reportedly resides securely with Matilda's guardians. But its journey reflects how awards, however symbolic, can become burdens. In Ledger's case, the award wasn't just for a performance. It was a farewell, a frozen moment of brilliance. And, in a tragic twist, worthy of Shakespeare, even that gold statue became part of a drama no one scripted. So there you have it. 15 classic Hollywood celebrities whose Oscars were stolen or destroyed. Behind every golden statue lies a story of passion, betrayal, redemption, or sorrow. These weren't just trophies. They were symbols of triumph and vulnerability. And while some were lost, melted, or stolen, what can never be taken is the legacy they represent. If these stories moved you, hit like, leave a comment about your favorite, and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden dramas of Hollywood's golden past.